Prior to the World Health Organization declaring COVID-19 to be a pandemic, the human element of the tourism industry within New York City was already under siege. The centralized theme of this struggle is the tour bus operators replacing live tour guides with automated tours. Tour bus operators make most of their money off of advertisements. They are effectively massive mobile billboards that lumber around the city, which tourists pay hundreds of dollars to ride on. However, ensuring that tourists do not stand up and clunk their heads on branches and traffic lights, and this type of thing happens often frequently, were tour guides who acted both as safety officers and ambassadors to the city. For the most part, tour guides were unionized, and all employed tour guides are licensed by the city, license, in order to officially practice. Not only do tour guides save lives, but they provide an integral service relative to historical preservation. They encourage travelers to boost local small businesses instead of community-killing business chains, and they provide travelers and visitors invaluable information in terms of how to get around and how to conduct themselves appropriately when visiting the city. An automated tour is no substitute for a live tour guide, and never will be. When lockdown measures were introduced and encouraged by many tour guides within our industry, without thinking about the long-term consequences, creeping in the back of my mind was the prospect that if the at-risk tour guides who worked the bus circuit were let go, the tour bus operators would use this as a method to implement the indefinite suspension of our vocational practice within the bus circuit. A multitude of thousands of trained professionals, not only in New York, but throughout the United States, were let go as a cost-cutting measure under the facade of public health. And as of July 4th weekend 2021, none of the guides within New York City who worked the bus circuit, and I'm sure in other big cities, were brought back. None of them were brought back. And instead, they have been replaced with automated tours, as I had foreseen, and as I have been raising the alarm about for the past year, only to fall on deaf ears by fellow industry insiders. Oh, this is just the new normal. This is how things are going to be. No. The fact that this July 4th weekend, with the city and the country reopening, and that the major tour bus companies deliberately are not rehiring our displaced colleagues is not only unacceptable, but downright disgraceful. Our dedicated and passionate colleagues who were thrown out of work in the name of public safety deserve to not be left behind or forgotten. They deserve to get their jobs back, and it is the moral obligation of every tour guide, especially those who were pushing for lockdown measures without thinking about the long-term consequences, to stand up to the tour bus companies and pressure them to bring back the guides. Within New York City, the professional association representing tour guides is the Guides Association of New York City, of which I was a former member of. And GANIC should not be lollygagging on this issue, as this is the most pressing issue within our industry right now. How do we relocate our dislocated professional colleagues back into the tourism industry? The answer some GANIC members give is this. Well, we're going to write our council members and pressure them into passing Bill 289A, which has been stalled since 2013, mind you, which mandates that tour bus operators must have a licensed tour guide on board. Is that really the best solution that GANIC can come up with? If that was, such a bill would have been already passed, right? I know all too well that politicians do not act by phone calls and letters alone. They act when public pressure is placed on them to act. What we have before us is a labor crisis, and it takes activism. It takes public advocacy campaigns involving the media to, raise awareness, right? And it takes grassroots action to procure a legal response to resolve labor disputes. If GANIC fails to up the ante to press this issue, and they really should be the organization taking charge, as they have had the resources and industrial partnerships to launch such a campaign, then it is up to tour guides to not wait on any organization and instead organize their own sustained campaign involving pickets and protests within Times Square and other tourism spots, and not just as a one-off, but at least 3 times per week, whether it's permitted or not. It is up to us to go to door, business to business, house to house, in both residential and commercial districts throughout the 5 boroughs to hand out leaflets and to inform the community about our industrial conflict as a means to stimulate public support. It is up to us to encourage travelers to boycott tour companies that do not hire live guides, to encourage travelers to leave negative reviews for companies which do not hire live guides as well. We must do everything that is legally permissible and or legally ambiguous if we must. We have to collectively fight in ways that we have never fought before in order that we may regain our careers and thus preserve the integrity of our embattled and battered profession. We must not allow the bus companies to permanently replace our colleagues with outdated, half-assed, uninspiring, cheap audio recordings so they can maximize their profits at their expense and at our expense, and cheat misinformed travelers out of the quality experience that of which a live tour guide can provide. When conducting tours in New York, tour guides often speak of the collective struggles. We speak of Clara Limlick organizing a general strike of 20,000 garment workers down on the Lower East Side in 1909 for shorter hours and better pay. We speak of the tragedy that was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 and the subsequent organizational efforts that ensured that such a tragedy would never ever happen again. We speak of Jane Jacobs organizing the Village to prevent Robert Moses from entirely destroying our city. We speak of Adam Clayton Powell organizing the citizens of Harlem to not shop where they can't work. We speak of the history that is the struggle of the 99% within New York against the 1%. And tour guides who speak of such struggles professionally are not excluded from or separate from that struggle in their own personal life. We are part of that struggle. And right now, we have our own labor struggle in our own time to deal with. Speaking from experience, I have the rare privilege of being a tour guide that can tour New York City historical sites that I was personally affiliated with and, even responsible for with my involvement within Zuccotti Park and Occupy Wall Street. It is one of the best feelings in the world as a tour guide to tell the crowd, you see this place right here? This is where such and such happened, and I was part of that. That is a wonderful feeling, and I want everyone to feel that. So rather than speaking of the current events of yesteryear as spectators, it is up to us to be active participants in shaping the history of tomorrow, starting right now. We must do all that we can in all of our power to see that by July 4th, 2022, every tour guide who was thrown out of work due to virus mitigation measures, who was prevented from going back to work even when they wanted to, is back in the saddle where they belong. And that the tour bus industry is not automated. If all the tour bus companies in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania can bring back their tour guides, and I just came back from Gettysburg, New York City and every other big city can do that as well. There is no excuse. This is a fight that we can win, but in order to win, we have to actually put up a fight. After we have struggled, after we make the news, and after we win, by fighting to get Bill 289A passed as a law officially, tour guides can give a tour about that struggle and say, I was part of that. And 10 years from now, tour guides who are not yet in the business will look back on us as the tour guides who banded together to save the industry. It's time to get to work, colleagues. I can't do this alone, and neither can you. It is time for the world to start respecting tour guides. And respect starts with stopping the automation of our profession. And what better place to wage that fight than in New York City? Because if you want the world to know about something, you gotta do it in New York. So repeat after me. Bring back the guides. Bring back the guides. Bring back the guides. Let us go win a labor struggle. And let's bring ourselves back to where we belong. This is Comrade Pella, signing off.